What's up, YouTube? This is the Working Investor. In this video, we're going to talk about this fund called FIVY, and we're going to talk about how this fund's use case will single-handedly decimate the use case for all the Kurv ETFs, in my humble opinion. Not financial advice, not legal advice, not tax advice. It's my own personal opinion. Let's look into Kurv for a second. And before we do so, let's look at the lineup of the single stock cover call ETFs by Ymax. You can see their entire lineup of their single stock funds. And you could see Kurv's lineup right here. They also have their single stock funds, AMZP, AAPY for Apple, Goop for Google, MISFI for Microsoft, Netflip for Netflix, and Teslip for Tesla. And then they have their KQQQ. So these are their single stock ETFs, and then their fund of funds of the Titans. That's what they call it. And we're going to look into AMZP, for example. And you could see that in AMZP, they have a distribution rate of 25.11%. And in my personal opinion, the use case for people who want to go into Kurv is because they want their price to be relatively more stable. Not necessarily better in total returns, but price to be stable. Because if you want to look at total returns, I'll pull up my notes from a video that I compared every single Kurv fund to Ymax funds, and you'll see that, let's look at the numbers itself and you make your own judgment. So this is the notes from a video that I made November 27th, and I used Seeking Alpha, and you could see that their Tesla, looking at all the funds of Kurv, and you see Tesla. You could see that Tesla was up 41%. You could see Tesla total return is 27%, while TSLP, the Kurv counterpart, is only 24%. The Amazon, which we're going to talk about in this video, at that point, AMZ had a total return of 35%. AMZP had 31%. You could see the only one that Kurv actually won was the Google, where Goop returned a 19.21% total return, and GUI fell really far short with 2.66% at the time I made that video. So let's look at what I'm talking about when it comes to price. We're only focusing on the price stability. So here you could see the price action of Amazon. We're just going to look year over year. The top right here is the dark blue, which is Amazon itself. And you could see Amazon had its ups and downs, especially on that drop in the market when everything dropped around August 6th, 7th, and 8th in that period. And you could see the yellow is the bottom, which is Ymax's AMZ cover call ETF, and then the light blue is the middle, which is Kurv. Now you'll notice that they all dropped together in that period in August. The question is, did they recover? So one thing you have to think to yourself when it comes to the cover call strategy, right? Or synthetic cover call strategy is there's a gimme and gotcha. There's a trade-off, right? You're getting dividends because your fund is generating income via option premium. And by selling a cover call, right, you're trading off upside potential, because normally you would have an infinite upside, uncapped upside. You're putting a cap on the upside, and that's how you get your dividend. The risky part is when the market takes a quick drop down and then it shoots back up, you may find yourself capped out somewhere in the bottom, and you only give yourself a little bit of room to go up. So you get to ride the roller coaster down, but you don't necessarily get to ride the whole entire roller coaster up. So that's one of the shortcomings why a lot of the funds, in price-wise, can underperform the underlier itself. And that's one of the use cases why I'm looking into Kurv as a potential candidate to capture a little bit more upside potential. Now, this action we call whipsaw. That's just a term when the market reverberates and goes really quickly down and then, changes course violently and goes really quickly up. That's the whipsaw effect. So that's why I was looking at this light blue, because of Kurv, which captures a little bit, because it seems to be that they write their calls a little bit further, out of the money. So they give yourself a little bit more breathing room to capture some of the upside, but you are missing out on the dividends, as you can see. Like looking at Ymax, if you go to AMZ, you could see here that their distribution rate that they post is 58.54%. I think it changes month to month. And then if you go on Kurv, as we saw earlier, the distribution rate is 25.11%. So you get almost a double distribution rate. That kind of that's why AMZY beat them with total return, even though AMZP's price is more stable. So it depends on what you're looking at. But now the question is, can you find a fund that gives you a better yield than 25%, maybe 41%, 42%, right? Because the highest fund in Kurv is, I checked all their funds right now currently, and it's their Netflix fund. I think that's about 35%, 35.24%. What if I could tell you I could get you a fund that gives you 40+% distribution rate? Estimated, that's the caveat, that's my guess, and we're going to get real numbers at the end of the month for FIVY, and it gives you way more upside potential, and it solves the problem of the whipsaw, in my opinion, theoretically. So let's talk about this. So I was going through the prospectus of FIVY and FEET, and you'll see the breakdown. So in FIVY, you'll see that the way it's broken down is 40% of the fund is actually carrying the underlying, and 60% of the entire fund actually carries the single stock cover call ETFs. And we're talking about 5 single stock cover call ETFs. Currently, they're carrying, from week A, they're carrying Tesla. From week B, they're carrying FIVY, which is Meta, and they're carrying NVIDIA. And from week C, they're carrying Netflix, which is their Netflix cover call, synthetic cover call ETF. And then from week D, currently it's MicroStrategy or their Misty one. And they could change. So remember, 40% of what they're carrying is the actual underlying stock itself, the actual, and then 60% is the, single stock cover call ETFs that correlate to these underlyings. So what does that mean? So what does this mean? It means that, 40% is uncapped upside because you don't have a cover call against it. And 60% is capped upside. Would you agree about that, right? And then if you let's look at the scenario. Look at the scenario. For example, let's say there's a reverberation whipsaw, right? Let's say, for example, hypothetically, there's a 10% drop in the market, and then it's followed by a 10% rise. Let's just say theoretically you have a capped upside, right? Let's say, for example, there's a 2% capped upside. So of the, 2% drop, you're able to capture 20% of the rise. So 20% of, so 2% they can capture from the upside, right? And then Ymax has this new thing called the call credit spread. And you'll see it in the prospectus of all their funds, a lot of their single stock cover call ETFs. And they call it the opportunistic strategy, where they could still they have another tool in their tool belt where they can write call credit spreads to try to capture more of the upside. So let's just say theoretically they can capture 2% more of the drop, of the 10% drop. So they can essentially, from the cover call strategy ETF portion of FIVY, they can capture 4% of the upside. So we're going to call it 4 out of 10 captured. Now remember that's representing 60% of the fund, but let's go to the other 40%. 40% is the actual raw underlying. And if the raw underlying rebounds and goes back up, makes a V-shaped recovery, then remember it's uncapped. Since it's uncapped, it's able to capture everything. And the other portion, the 60%, from a 10% drop in price, 4% will go up 1-to-1 because it's uncapped. And of the 6 points that it can go up, you can capture 40% of that. Why do I say 40%? Because 20% from the call credit from the synthetic cover call, and 20% from the call credit spreads. And you can also argue that besides the upside that's capped, you're also getting premium, which is also counted into the equation to help fill in that gap. So basically, but without looking at the premium itself, just looking at the price, let's say, well, actually, you would have to say the premium because the call credit spread brings in more premium. So we'll look at it as holistically. So let's say potentially it can, it could get 4% uncapped, and then, from the 6%, it gets 2.4% uncapped. What do I mean? So if you type in 0.4, which is 40%, times 6, that's 2.4. And that's where you get the 2.4. So potentially they're able to get 6.4% in this theoretical case, upside potential of the 10% drop. And I was looking at the average payment, and when I checked last time, it was around 40%. I was looking at the averages of all the funds. You know what I'm noticing? And this is such a moving target. NVIDIA used to be part of FIVY and Feet, but I was looking, just downloaded the holdings, and I'm not with the time. I mean, my information was just about a week ago. And look at this. It looks like they swapped out, they dumped NVIDIA, and they look at the top number one holding here, they put in coin. When I say number one, I just mean in order because they try to keep everything balanced. So I'm wrong. They got rid of NVIDIA and they put in coin and Coney, right? So I stand corrected. They have coin. So from week 1, they have Tesla and Tesla. From week 2, they have FIVY and Meta. I say right because they have both the underlying and the cover call. And then week 3, they have, and they don't have NVIDIA anymore in week 2. In week 3, they have Netflix and Netflix. And they have coin and Coney. And then they have Mr. and Misty. So it's kind of interesting. They just kind of moved it up. Is it good? Is it bad? I mean, they just pretty much doubled their Bitcoin exposure now. And they got a little bit rid of the chips. But who knows, But this actually I want to point out a shortcoming to all my caveat. So my shortcoming is the whole idea is that you're going to ride the wave down, unfortunately, but you're also going to have a potential to ride the wave up. But this is my concern. What happens if because they have the ability to rebalance every single month? You know what? I guess that's because it was the end of the month. So they have in the prospectus, I think it said 3 days before the end of the month. So let's say they rebalance and they could swap things out if it doesn't meet the Dorsey-Wright rules, guidelines. And what if you rode underlying all the way down and you're hoping because you're holding this fund, you want to ride it back up because you want to have that 40% direct exposure. And let's say they swap out, like you see in this scenario, they swapped out the NVIDIA for coin and Coney. So now you don't get an opportunity to ride the wave up. So that could be that, this ability to be flexible and nimble is a double-edged sword. It's a pro because it kind of keeps you relevant with, momentum plays of Dorsey-Wright, but it also can work against you because you may not be able to have opportunity if you took a significant loss, in price, and you want to kind of stick around, wait for it to rebound. You may not be able to ride the momentum up. So it could be a good or bad. So like I said, I don't look at everything as black and white. I think there's a lot of gray area, but I do see the use case that this, style of investing where maybe you could do it yourself, where you actually hold the underlying as a certain percent, but here it's nice and packaged, and, and hold the cover call. You may be able to get, some of that more of that upside capture to keep your price more stable. And also when I said 43%, it was my average. I was looking at the average payment of the underlying, including NVIDIA, but now I have to recalculate with Coney. But Coney is pretty compelling too. It's like 100% yielder, pretty much. So it should be up there as well, somewhere in the 40s. But, we're going to get real numbers this coming month in January 2025. So we'll have real numbers to look at. Anyways, just food for thought. This is The Working Investor over and out. I hope you guys have a wonderful trading week. Be well.